Welcome to Parallel Lives. Today we're talking about the influence of media on maladaptive daydreaming. Our guests are Amelia, a 20-year-old college student, Leaf, 18-year-old from America, and Red Halo from North Carolina.
Hello.
Oh, shoot, I totally forgot to introduce Levi.
That's okay.
Yes, we do have a co-host. His name is Levi.
I am not just a shadow, I am here as well. Just a voice.
So to start it off, let's just go with the obvious question. What type of media influences your daydreams the most?
I'm kind of weird in the aspect that I have ADHD, so a lot of my hyperfixations influence a lot of my daydreams. Like whatever I'm hyperfixating on the most is like what like acts as like the catalyst for a lot of my daydreams. And I have the tendency to hyperfixate on certain bands. And I always thought that, like, I'm a writer, so I thought it was like, "Oh, I'm just thinking of a bunch of fan fiction," but nope. Uh, well, sort of, but it's, like, actual, like, daydreaming. Um, but the most prominent one for the past couple years has been, like, bands, and it's really weird, but mostly, like, YouTube series as well. I don't really watch a lot of TV or play a lot of video games. It's literally just YouTube and listen to music. So if I get like really invested in like the actual content creators, then they form most of my daydreams.
What about you, Halo?
Let's see. I was influenced by pretty much all types of media that I would consume since I was little, like games, movies, TV shows, and I would say it also changed over time. So when I was younger, I remember I went through a big Pokemon phase, and I think some of my earliest daydreams with plots probably were related to Pokemon and then Power Rangers when I was really young. And then as I got older, it kind of changed with me, and whatever I was kind of into, it would change into the style. It would go into the plots, and the plots would become more deeper. So it would like recently, like I was watching certain Batman movies, certain James Bond movies, and then certain characters and certain subplots would kind of make their ways into my daydream. So pretty much anything that I'm consuming, it usually affects in one way or the other. Either even if not in plot, in mood or tone. Like sometimes if I watch horror or certain genres, then it kind of affects it. But yeah, pretty much anything I watch or listen to, books, music, movies, um, it usually affects it in some way or another.
And Amelia?
For me, it's mostly video games and movies, and I guess like some TV series. I don't watch TV series very often, but mostly video games and movies, as well as music. But that's because there's a musical component to my daydreams for the most part, and for most people, I presume. Um, I Similar to Halos. They kind of change over time, and I pick up stuff from the media that I've watched, like, recently. I think recently I watched Rango, and I was like I really enjoyed the Western theme, and, all my stuff has kind of taken on this, like, sort of Western-esque like, all the little, the thematic elements of Westerns and things like that. So, yeah, mostly games, movies, and music.
So everything. I think that's what I just heard from all three of you. Is there one that's super obvious that or stronger?
For me, it's usually either like YouTube series or bands. That's my main one. It's like I've had this hyperfixation on this one particular band for like 5 years, and they still have a really huge influence on my daydreams. It's like for me personally, not much has changed. Um, but yeah, I also tend to like try to stick to one daydream and not like go off like center or whatever because I'm a writer and I feel like I have to like actually write out my daydreams to feel like it actually has some form of importance. So, um, yeah, for me personally, not much has changed in the past, like, 5 years.
Let's see. For me personally, I think anime and manga actually were my biggest influence. Like the other person spoke, I'm also a writer, so I would always kind of pick apart their plots, and sometimes I would daydream sort of in those worlds and kind of pick apart the plot, then go down a different possible thing that could have happened, and I would do that over and over with pretty much everything I would watch and consume. So I think that those two are probably the biggest for me.
For me, it was mostly movies. I like the movies are very concise and like they're very packed with detail. So I like movies and I like the audio visual kind of component of it. There's imagery paired with music for a lot of time, and it's very kind of closely knit. Um, I I like to draw, so that's kind of how like I'm less of a writer and more of an artist. So I like that the visual aspect of movies. And video games too, because video games are interactive. So I like that kind of something about video games and movies kind of really draws me in. Um, music as well, but that's just because the music is kind of it helps me think.
Yeah, it's kind of a trigger, not just an inspiration.
Exactly.
A lot of maladaptive daydreamers mention that their daydreams aren't affected only by media, but also by real world events, like news events or hell, even when the anxiety aspect comes in of what's going to happen in the future and sort of, daydreaming about what's happening or what happened or anything like that. So, would any of you say that your daydreams are more affected by real world events or more by media events?
I'd say media events mostly. Um, I don't I don't go too in depth in trying to keep up with real world events, to be honest. Just because I don't really have the energy to like keep super involved with the news. Um, and it's just like media, especially. I don't know. I'm veering off kind of into the next question, but um, it's media just in general is kind of more of a like it's an escapism thing, so I tend to focus more on media, so like things in media I tend to latch on to more. There are some um daydreams, I guess, plots where it's like it does like mention real world events, but it nothing really springs from it. It's definitely more like media events.
I would say that the topics and the subject matter of what I daydream about is definitely affected more by media and what I've consumed. But I think that the tone of my daydreams usually it's affected a lot by my real world events and how my life's going on. Because it's also since it was also a big coping mechanism. Sometimes, like if I was going through certain negative things in life, sometimes my daydreams would be even more negative. Or if I'm going through social problems, sometimes there would be a more social aspect in the daydreams. Or so in certain ways, it's the tone and sometimes the overarching themes would be connected with my real world events. But like I mentioned earlier, the subject matter and the plots and the subplots are usually more formed by media.
How about you, Amelia?
I will have to agree with Leaf and Halo in that a lot of like because it's for me it's kind of a coping mechanism. It's an escape from these real world events or things going on kind of in my personal life. A lot of it tends to be somewhat detached, but I do notice a lot of overarching themes are very similar to things that are going on in like in current events. Or they have like a an overarching theme that's related to it. Um yeah, I for the most part I try to abstain from current event stuff, mostly just because it doesn't particularly interest me. Um but yeah, it For me, it's mostly things that are directly in my personal life and not so much current events.
I also think that when it comes to real world versus media events, media is more, uh, it's not as limited as reality, so it can really be anything. And I think that's why maladaptive daydreamers are especially affected by media because, well, hell, it can be anything. It's not just, it doesn't have to be real or it doesn't have to make sense for it to be sort of something that we bring into our daydreams.
Yeah, I feel like mine are, if I understood Amelia right, like the 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 dressings, the
Mhm.
plot and the characters and the situation, I guess, is pulled from the media, but like the meta narrative,
Mhm.
that's what's coming from my real surroundings, my what's going on in my life at the time, which actually took me years to notice because it's like the difference between weather and climate.
Mhm.
You don't notice the climate, you notice the weather.
Yeah.
So as far as genre goes, like thematically, what do you gravitate more towards? What are you pulling from, like horror or romance or action?
It depends on the type of story that I'm trying to tell. If I'm actually trying to, like, turn it into, like, a piece of writing, then it's usually, like, I try to focus more on, like, young adult and, like, stuff that I'd actually, like, wanna publish, so more, like, coming of age stuff, I guess, but, like, if it's just, like, me randomly daydreaming, then it's usually, like, thriller, horror. Do you know what hurt comfort is?
I don't think I've heard that.
Hurt comfort is basically a trope where one of the characters gets, like, injured or hurt or sick, and then another one of the characters has to come in and, like, comfort them and take care of them, and I'm a sucker for that, like, that's literally all that I think about, like, that's all that I daydream about is just, hurt comfort, but that's more of a trope, but if we're talking about, like, genre, I also really like supernatural, stuff, like paranormal, like monsters and cryptids and stuff, um, but that's just if I'm randomly daydreaming, it really depends if I'm trying to, like, find something to actually write about and publish, because that's what I wanna do with my life, I wanna write books, so, yeah, thriller, mostly, horror, monsters, stuff like that.
I intentionally, because like the other person said, I'm also really interested in writing, and so I intentionally I've been choosing a lot of different genres to daydream. Like I have westerns, action, fantasy, some romance. I have like Victorian era like genre things. I have detective ones. So I've intentionally tried to push myself, and I think I've hit almost every genre in my daydream.
For me, I gravitate especially towards sci-fi and fantasy. Um, I just really I really enjoy the creativity that also has kind of a grounded quality and that like I really like to figure out, for example, like I love creature design, monster design, that kind of stuff. I love to take like a concept of like what can this creature do? Like what kind of abilities can they have and how does it make sense? Like that's I guess a hyperfixation that I have is like trying to figure out how something could like something fantastical could exist in like reality or on a planet or whatever. Like I love aliens. Um uh I enjoy a lot of horror as well. Um but more like the character, I guess more thriller. Um like it's not about scaring the audience. There isn't really an audience, but it's more about I guess the emotion, the feeling of like I don't know, like I don't know how to describe it. But yeah, I sci-fi, fantasy. I have some horror elements as well. I really like surrealist like theme as well in general, like almost Lovecraftian stuff, like more like personal growth. But yeah, I I take themes from all kinds of places, but for the most part, it's sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah, I just had the thought that, like, I love horror. Like, that's what I like to watch. I also like, supernatural things, so I watch a lot of, ghost story stuff. But my daydreams are science fiction. So I guess how well does, like, the genre that you choose to watch actually how much of it makes it into your daydreams? Is it, I like sci-fi, I watch sci-fi, and I daydream sci-fi? Or is it like, I watch sci-fi, but I daydream? I I don't know, something else.
Again, I personally don't watch a lot of TV or movies. I'm just, like, addicted to YouTube, like, it's legitimately an addiction, so that's all I watch. So stuff like that doesn't really affect my daydreams, but mostly when I do consume, like, other people's writing, it is within that same genre of, like, thriller and, like, hurt comfort, so that does mostly affect my daydreams, but I also there's also, for me, a lot of background romance where it's, like, it's not the forefront of the, um, story, like, it's not well, sometimes it is, like, that's the thing, like, but I don't consume a lot of romantic media, like, that's not something that I watch or read about a lot, but I daydream about it a lot, like, it's always at least, like, going on in the background, and it's not, like, any, like, scandalous or, super dramatic, it's just 2 characters finding love and comfort in each other, and I love to think about that stuff and write about that stuff, but I don't consume it a lot, like, I don't like a lot of reading a lot of romance, but that's mostly because most romance out there is, like, straight, and I'm not straight, so I think about a lot of, like, same gender couples because that's just what I find comfort in, um, but yeah, so I kind of have that same thing where it's like, I don't consume a lot of this type of genre, but, like, I constantly think about it. So, yeah, it's odd, I guess.
Does that happen to you, Halo?
I think as far as genre and about how you daydream in one and consume the other, I actually don't consume much horror. Like I don't enjoy it. I watch some horror let's plays. I'm interested like in the concept of horror and like how certain authors or game creators like create horror and use certain mechanics in either writing or game mechanics in order to cause more dread and tension and how it can kind of affect the readers. But I actually don't enjoy generally just reading horror or watching horror movies. So I do almost none of that, but I enjoy writing it as well. So, but I honestly I hate watching horror movies by myself. I don't do it, but I love writing it. So
And you use your daydreams to write, so that would be what you're daydreaming about.
yeah, but it's kind of also like I guess I'm also in the writer and director chair in the daydreams, and I kind of know where everything is, and I kind of use the daydreams to kind of plot out certain characters constantly and come up with their subplots. I don't have that control if I'm watching a movie. The jump scares, I don't know when they're coming. I don't know what plots are going to happen, and I don't like that fact. So I don't know if it's the control or what. So, but it's definitely different from what I daydream and what I consume.
Is there a big disparity in yours, Amelia, between what you enjoy consuming and what you actually end up daydreaming?
To an extent, yeah. I agree with Halo in that yeah, I don't like watching a lot of horror either because like he said, like I don't know when the jump scares are going to be. I don't like yeah, like it's scary. And I don't particularly enjoy that, but I do a lot of the creature designs that I make are scary. They're very grotesque. Um but I don't find them very scary because I know what they are, like I designed them from the ground up and like I understand them. So uh I would say that's kind of where the disparity is with the horror. I also I don't well, hmm. I watch a lot of action and comedy. And I see that not a lot of that gets into my work. Like my stuff is generally very serious, and there's only little bits of comedy. Um, and the action is more tense than it is comical to an extent. It kind of depends on the story, but yeah, for the most part, there is a slight disparity. I always enjoy sci-fi though. I watch a lot of sci-fi, and that stuff always comes in. It like usually like what I was saying with I think the westerns before. It's like little bits of the themes that I watch, but it always comes into the sci-fi and the fantasy and stuff like that. So, yeah.
It feels like I've been hit by some existential realization that, damn, the media I consume is completely different to my daydreams, and I've never thought about it like that at all. Uh, yeah, for me, it's like I love sci-fi and medical stuff IRL, but my daydreams are just not into that stuff. So yeah, damn, that's a good question that we got just like on a whim.
Isn't it weird how you can like be in the community so long and talk to so many maladaptive daydreamers, and after years of doing it, you're like still realizing new things about it.
Yeah, but it reminds us just how different we all are. Like we can relate on a bunch of stuff, but at the end of the day, it's still like, damn. And that's what makes it interesting as well to talk to other maladaptive daydreamers, because my experience won't be the same as yours, and vice versa.
Mhm.
So maladaptive daydreamers spend a whole lot of time daydreaming. And oftentimes, when we try to cut back on our daydreams, it just doesn't go very well. So, to listen to other people's experiences is always good. So, the question is, have you ever tried to cut back on certain media because of your daydreaming habits? And if so, how did you do it and how did it go? I think this question can relate heavily in terms of music, especially seeing as music is such a a big trigger for a lot of people.
See, the thing with me is that I personally didn't see it as big of a problem as I did before that I realized like wow, this is actually like a really big part of my life because I thought it was like normal mostly because the problems that like my parents and my teachers have like pinned on me for my whole life, that was my problem with not being able to like pay attention or whatever, was like my addiction to the internet. So that's what I've like been blaming most of, the problems that maladaptive daydreaming have also caused for me. I've pinned on the internet. So um I personally have not really tried to cut back on media because of my daydreaming. I've been trying to cut back on media because of like executive dysfunction or like other like procrastinating thing because I didn't realize that like daydreaming itself was like had such an impact on my life until like literally a couple months ago. So, not because of daydreaming specifically, but I have tried to cut back on media like in general, and it's not very good. Um, I have uh let's say an addiction to the internet, and I have tried to like completely um like not plug off, that's not the right word. Um but like unplug. That's the word, unplug. Um and I was it did not go very well. My mental health got a lot worse. Um just yeah, it's like a really big coping mechanism for me, so try to like, rip that out completely out of my life did not end up going very well. So, I just tried completely, like, deleting all of my social media accounts from my phone, and it didn't work at all.
How about you, Halo?
Um, let's see. I was going to actually answer similar to Leafy. All my life, I've had really bad concentration and especially procrastination. And because of the time lost of the daydreaming itself and the procrastination, other issues of losing out on finishing certain tasks and other issues, um, a lot of it was for time reasons. I ended up cutting back a lot of media, especially certain video games that are kind of repetitive. Like if people have ever played Slay the Spire or the Civilization games, there are certain ones where they're really, really repetitive and they're really, really time consuming. And even though I really enjoyed them, I thought that they were kind of taking up too much time in my life. So I ended up deleting them off of my computer. And I think a big part of that is just because of the constant time lost because of daydreaming. And I wasn't getting anything done with the because I also had video games on my plate too, so I ended up deleting a lot of them.
Same as with Leaf and Halo. I have tried to cut back more so out of a hyperfixation than like trying to stop the daydreaming. Like so for example, I have one of my current fixations is on a video game. I've tried to cut back on it more out of a hyperfixation because I spend so much time thinking about that one that I am neglecting other media types, like just like to focus solely on this one thing that I'm interested in. Um, as for like limiting stuff related to the daydreaming, kind of, I I haven't really made like a conscious effort to stop. It's more just been related to circumstances like kind of outside of my control that I've kind of not kept up with media in general. I'd imagine if I tried, I don't think I would be very successful just because when I get into something, I'm like super into it, and it's very hard to fight that.
How often does it actually happen? Every single time you watch a movie, bam, there it is? Or, like, half the time?
Almost every single time. I'll always like take little bits and pieces. You know how like part of why I love movies is because they're so jam packed with detail, and like there's the audio and the visual component, so it's like it's like the equivalent of like a bowl of candy or something. It's just this awesome little treat, I guess. Um, so I always want to take like little bits and pieces of it and like incorporate it into like the whatever my current fixation is. Um, so yeah, almost everything that I will watch, I'll try and like take apart and add little things that I like to it.
What about you, Leaf? Is it, like, every single thing, or is it,
It's weird because at first I think about it and say, "Oh, no, I don't like, it doesn't trigger me that much." Like, for example, listening to music. Like, at first I thought like, "Oh, no, it doesn't trigger me that much. It's only when I actually try." But then I started noticing it that, like, yes, every time I listen to music, I do start to daydream, and then I can usually, like, stop myself and say, "Oh, crap, I'm daydreaming again. Well, didn't mean for that to happen." Um, so, like, with music, I know, and, like, I want to say, like, with, like, movies and, TV shows and stuff, like, I want to say, like, "Oh, no, not that much," but I know that if I, like, sat down and watched a movie again, like, right now, I would notice, like, oh, I'm daydreaming again." So, like, at first I thought, "Oh, no, it doesn't happen that often," but then when I actually started to notice it, I was like, "Okay, this is a thing." Uh, yeah, so at least with music, it's like, yes, it is, like, 99% of the time. Yeah.
I think I was back when I was daydreaming more, before I went cold turkey on it a few months ago. I would daydream all the time, and since there really isn't a term for it, I would say that like some of the deeper daydreams, if I was able to pace by myself and mumble and walk around, those would be kind of like the deeper, more immersive daydreams. But I would also constantly, in the back of my head daydream. Like let's say while I'm watching a movie, or while I'm watching other media, or driving, or supposed to be listening in school. I would always be kind of daydreaming in the back of my mind. So when it's hard for me to, when it comes to media, it's hard for me to say how much it is because it would happen constantly. Like, let's say if I'm watching movies, I'd always be daydreaming in the back of my mind some plot in it and how it connects or something else. And even if I didn't like a movie, if I'm watching a movie, let's say with friends or family that I really hate, I'm daydreaming out of boredom and I'm daydreaming about something else. So it's hard for me to exactly like put a number or percentage on like how much it would affect me because it was a constant thing.
Have you guys ever actually experienced a media type that does not affect your daydreaming?
Does watching like YouTube videos count? Well, kinda. Some YouTube videos, yes, it does affect, but like if it's just like scrolling through Tumblr or Instagram and like, watching just random YouTube videos, I think that's like the only thing that like keeps me from daydreaming. I guess that's why I go on it so often, because my mind is subconsciously like, okay, we need to stop this, we need to take a break, and then just makes me latch on to social media.
I have two major ones. I would say that their first one are some video games. If I can get so engrossed or focused in certain games, then that kind of keeps me from daydreaming. Like I've still been playing chess because I feel like it keeps me kind of mentally sharper a little bit. So sometimes I was playing a chess game and I was so kind of into it that I wouldn't be daydreaming. Or certain other video games like Advanced Wars, Advanced Wars, or certain other random video games. And I would say that I'm actually, I think, in the very small minority. I'm one of the few people I don't think that music actually pulls me out of daydream. And I think I'm in the really small minority here. But like, if I was daydreaming and in a really deep daydream, I don't want to listen to music because it would pull me out. It would distract me too much. So I would usually just have silence. And and since I've been doing way less daydreaming now, one of the things that I'll do to help me focus is sometimes to actually listen to music because while I'm working, because it helps me from daydream, which I think that it wouldn't help most people here though.
Amelia?
Very few media types like pull me out of daydreams. I think the only one that I could think of off the top of my head would be podcasts where people just talk. Um, and because I think it has something to do with like there is no music. My mine is very tied to music. Um, so when it's just people talking, I start to listen to what they're saying, and it kind of pulls me out. Um, but I think that is about it. Um, like even informational stuff. I guess maybe informational stuff to an extent. Um, I like to learn so I can incorporate what I have learned into daydreams, but I guess in that moment I am not currently daydreaming because I'm actually listening to the thing, whatever it is. Um, I do watch a lot of educational content. I love nature documentaries. Um, I enjoy kind of speculative science stuff. You know, people talking about like, oh, something about life on other planets and stuff like that. How would it be, or like what that kind of stuff. Like more thought experiment than than purely factual. But I do enjoy the educational stuff. So I guess those two would be the main kind that I don't daydream from. But with informational stuff, I will incorporate it later.
So if I could jump in one more time because what have they mentioned? Podcasts, that is also another thing that keeps me from daydreaming. But I would say also these actually Discord voice chats. Since I've been daydreaming less the last few months, they've actually been one of the major things that have been helping. If I just either talk to people or just hear different conversations, it really has been really useful for keeping me from daydreaming. So for some reason, just talking with other people in these voice chats or podcasts, those have really helped me as well.
It sounds like there might be some sort of social aspect to it. Like, I mean, a podcast, you're not literally engaging with the narrators or anything, but it's more conversational. Maybe that's what makes them special.
Mhm.
I only listen to podcasts to help me sleep, to be honest, but I think that, like, YouTube videos are similar in that way where it's like you have to actually, like, concentrate on what the person is saying, so it is like that sort of conversational aspect to it.
Yeah, like commentaries or reviews. I watch a lot of those too. But they're very similar to podcasts. They're a little bit more edited, and it's usually one person, but it's a similar kind of format where it's that sort of conversational, someone talking about a thing. And yeah, that also, I don't daydream with that kind of stuff.
How has the way that you engage with media changed as you've become aware of your daydreaming and its impact? So, have you consumed more media, less media?
I used to, like, watch a lot of, like, TV and movies and stuff like that, but again, I just watch YouTube all day. That's what I do, but I guess if I would, like, watch, like, TV and movies and play video games, I would not try to abstain from it, but kind of be more aware of what's going on in my head and what I'm feeling. Um, I'm not one of those types of people who think that, like, daydreaming is bad. I like, if it's getting in the way of your life, then yes, it has a negative impact, but I don't think daydreaming in and of itself is bad, so I personally don't try to, like, stop daydreaming, so I guess it would be more of just trying to be aware of what's going on and not completely, shut myself off from my emotions and what's going on in my head. Um, yeah, just trying to be more aware of my surroundings.
I've definitely engaged with media in a different way, especially in the last few months. Um, I guess for years, daydreaming kind of left me feeling hollow. Like, even after I feel really connected to the plot I really like, or after daydreaming for hours and hours constantly for day after day, year after year, I wouldn't have anything at the end of it, like anything to share. I wouldn't have created something, anything creatively. And it took so much time away from me and out of other pursuits that I could have done. So I kind of felt it always felt hollow. So I guess it's definitely changed the way I've also consumed media because I've started noticing that same hollow feeling in certain forms of like sitting down at a screen playing a video game for X amount of hours or watching a certain movie over and over that I know isn't really going to it's not going to improve on anything. So I've been kind of trying to consume less and create more. Like instead of just playing a video game, I've been working on a mod for a different video game. Instead of just having a media of certain comics and manga, this and that, I've been starting to work on my own. I've been trying to do other things musically. Hopefully I'll be getting back into singing, and I'm trying to write my own things. So I guess the overarching, it's definitely changed the way I approach media, and I want to watch people do less things and daydream less, and actually create and have actual more real life experience.
That's why I'm a writer, or I call myself a writer. I do a lot more daydreaming than actually writing, but that's why I want to write because I want to turn all of, like, the daydreaming and all of the things going on in my head into a piece of art to share with the world. I think that's really important, and I think that, like, giving a purpose to my daydreaming, like, gives it actual value. That's why I try so hard to, like, turn it into an actual creative endeavor, and that's why I haven't really seen it as this big bad thing because, again, most of my life, all of my problems have been pinned on the internet and being on the computer all the time. Like, "You need to get off that computer, you need to get off that phone, you're on the phone all the time." Well, it's not just the phone, it's also, being stuck in my own head, but because no one pointed that out to me at a young age, it was always just the internet, then I haven't seen it as big of a problem as it probably is. And also, again, untreated ADHD symptoms as well have also contributed to that, but it's kind of just the way that I was brought up also kind of affected how I see it. So, trying to actually turn it into a creative endeavor would like actually like give it value and kind of say like, hey, this is worth it. So I think that it has some value if you can give it value, if you can, you know, turn it into something creative and productive and something that is positive.
My awareness of my maladaptive daydreaming is kind of like what Leaf was saying. It's sort of a double-edged sword in that, like, it's this wonderful, kind of amazing ability, but at the same time, it comes at such a cost of all this time that is wasted, essentially. It takes away from your creative endeavors. The way I engage with media now, as opposed to kind of before I was more aware of this, is that I have become a lot more analytical, more critical of what I consume. I I kind of I take it apart because I want to see the inner, like, I want to see all what makes it what it is. For example, like in film, um like composition and color and how the camera moves and stuff like that. That's kind of where I've delved instead of just these sort of surface level understandings of this media. I'm delving into what makes it this way, how I could create this, how I could get what's in my head out onto something tangible. Um and yeah, cuz like with my artistic endeavors, kind of drawing and stuff, I want to make something more than just like these kind of silly little doodles that don't make any sense. I want to tie it to something and be able to share it with people. And for example, in some of my writing, like with other people, like the role playing, um that has been kind of a really big recent change for um my daydreaming, in that it feels like I have some kind of point to daydreaming. Like I think about how I will, you know, construct this piece and give it to like another person and how they bounce it off. It's actually I don't know, it's kind of it's becoming more helpful, but it's still at that, like, I'm spending so many hours like trying to figure this out, and you know, I like you it's not sustainable. I can't spend all this time like thinking about that. I have to find a way to moderate it. But I don't know. Like it feels like there's going to be like a big turning point soon. Trying to figure out how to control this and get a better handle on it.
Yeah, channeling it into creativity and making your own media instead of being pushed along by it is I think definitely an approach to getting rid of the maladaptive part.
Mhm.
It's like Amelia just said, there's doing these things like going into role playing or writing or making art and stuff like that. You phrased it really well where you said that there's sort of like a point to daydreaming. You can actually take those daydreams and the time that you've spent with those daydreams and actually turn it into something that at least has, some sort of meaning to it other than just daydreaming. So yeah, that was really, really well said.
Thank you.
Like the odd man out in this situation. I have no creative aspirations.
But you're making a podcast.
Yeah, that's got nothing to do with my daydreams though.
Oh, yeah.
But also, like Demmer, you mentioned something interesting in your previous video. Sorry if this is like off point, but also I think it does add to this topic as well that a lot of people will tell you, "Wow, you're so creative with your daydreams. You should write about it or something." And Demmer made a good point that sometimes that's not possible at all. So just to put it out there, just because we're maladaptive daydreamers and we have all this stuff happening in our minds, it doesn't necessarily mean that it makes it easy to put it onto paper or to make it make sense in a way. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that.
since Dimmer just said, well, but this podcast has nothing to do with their daydreams, I think creative outlets can be really helpful for people, even if they have nothing to do with their daydreams. Just being able to kind of have another outlet. Like she has this podcast, she has her blog, she has her YouTube channel. I think other people also can do other things. Like I've talked to people who also they try to do their own clothes, like they do either like sewing or they have like certain fashion things. It might have nothing to do with their daydream. I think that so many of us get so wrapped up in our daydreams when there are many other things out there that we could kind of that we would really enjoy and that could help us a lot.
We have some questions from the audience. Since media is a strong trigger, do you abstain from consuming certain types to not disturb your sleep?
I can actually answer this question. I do the opposite, in which I actually consume media to fall asleep. I had a really short sleep schedule. Like I'd only get to sleep at like 3 or 4 in the morning, until I started like taking medication, and also I either watch podcasts or watch ASMR to sleep. So like I kind of do the opposite, in which I have to consume certain types of media to fall asleep.
And then our other audience question was, do you feel fortunate that your passions happen to be tied to creativeness? Because I can't relate to that at all. There we go. My fellow non-creative. Is it that it happens to be though? I think that's a good question. Do you happen to also be a creative person who daydreams, or do your daydreams push you to be more creative?
I think my daydreams push me to be more creative because, again, it's like that feeling of like, wow, this is worth something if I actually put it on paper. I do feel fortunate a lot. I feel very grateful that some of it's not the best. I understand that. I'm not saying like, oh, it's all great. Like some things I wish that would just leave my brain, please. But um yeah, I feel somewhat grateful that I have this ability or whatever.
I don't know how much of like a lot of people all throughout my life have said I'm really creative, but I don't know how much of that's tied in with the maladaptive daydreaming. But even if it is, I don't think it's worth it because I think as another person here mentioned before about how great maladaptive daydreaming is, but it comes at a cost. Personally, for at least in my life, I think the cost was too high for any benefits it would give. And if I could go back in time and stop myself from starting this maladaptive daydreaming, I definitely would. So I don't feel fortunate at all for it, to be honest.
What would happen to your daydreams if you unplugged, for the rest of the year or something, and just didn't see any films, didn't play any video games, didn't scroll through the internet or anything, just divorced from media? What do you think would happen to your daydreams?
I think they'd get a lot more vague, if that makes sense. Cause at least for like the books that I'm trying to write, it's not based on any certain type of media. Like it's just like from my head. So like I don't think that would change. But if we're talking about like more, because again, I was a fan fiction writer when I was like 14 to 16. So I thought and so I try to turn all of my daydreams into fan fictions, and I didn't even like know that that was what I was doing. I didn't know that I was like daydreaming. So like if we're talking about like my daydreams that are actually based on like certain types of media, then like yeah, that would probably decline a lot. But if we're talking about just like stuff that I want to turn into original work, I don't think it would change that much. Cause sometimes I do not force myself, but sometimes I do like take that opportunity to pace around and whatever. So it might change just a bit, but since I don't write fan fiction anymore, probably not that much.
To be honest, and back when I was daydreaming a lot, I think I would do completely fine because I would just fill the media time with just more daydreaming. So if that were to happen, if all media of all kinds were if it was all gone all of a sudden.
I absolutely feel that way too. I think it
Yeah.
can be easy for people from the outside looking in to be like, well, just turn it off. You're you turn off what you're daydreaming about, but we're just daydreaming about it because it's there. If we turned it off, it wouldn't change our daydreams. I mean, in my opinion.
For me, I think what would happen would be more I think the subjects in my daydreams would change a little bit. More like I I really love just like all things kind of related to nature or the natural world. So I think if I did unplug from media, the like I guess the science fiction aspect of it, it would probably still be there, but it would be more directly tied to nature or about nature or because that's what would be around me. Um I think that's what would happen if I were to unplug it. I wouldn't stop daydreaming. The general themes would not change, but I guess the storytelling objects, I guess, would change.
I think that, because human beings are storytellers by nature, I think that the things that other people tell us might also then start to have an effect on our daydreams because we don't we don't get that that satisfaction from media necessarily, but then we might start to get hooked on fiction or consuming stories in a different manner. And one of those ways are just the way that people talk, the things people talk about, and stuff like that.
Knowing that there are other people that are going through this and stuff is just it's such a it's so helpful. And like yeah, it's a huge weight off my shoulders just, seeing everybody like working through this together and it's just very wholesome.
That's exactly what we want for this podcast. People to, even if they don't join the community, to get a little taste of it, to hear what people are
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah.
All right, so thanks for listening to this episode of Parallel Lives. We hope you enjoyed it, and also special thanks to everyone who took part in the episode for answering questions, for talking in the channels, asking questions, all that type of stuff. We really do appreciate it. And yeah, stick around if you want to hear more podcast episodes. Episodes are released every 1st and 16th. But yeah, thanks for tuning in and have a good one.